Well, joining us more live is former US Judge for the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, Joseph Cosgrove. Good evening to you, Joseph, and thank you very much for joining us. So James Comey seems adamant that he's innocent. He said he's heartbroken for the Department of Justice and keen to have a trial. What do you make of Comey's statements?
Well, I'm sure his lawyers would wish that he did not make any statements. It doesn't help him. It doesn't help him in his legal proceeding. But this is such a unique situation when we have the President of the United States making such outrageous statements, really, and being the one who is clearly behind the impetus of the prosecution itself. So Comey perhaps seemed to think that he needed to make a statement to offer some defense at this point, but he didn't get into any great detail. He didn't incriminate himself. So, we'll move on to the court proceeding itself.
Another part of one of the president's posts, he says that they impeached him twice, meaning Donald Trump indicted him 5 times over nothing. Justice must now be served. What do you make of those comments?
Well, he clearly is trying to balance something, it seems, with what happened to him in those legal proceedings that were abruptly ended because of his election, his re-election. And so, we never had a final determination as to the guilt or innocence with regard to those charges, except the one in New York where he was convicted on 34 counts, and that was upheld on appeal. But that should have nothing to do with whether anyone is charged. This should be something that, since the Watergate era, the Department of Justice had been somewhat detached from the executive branch, had certainly been detached from the president himself. Joe Biden's Attorney General, Merrick Garland, just abhorred being anywhere near the president. There has to be some independence with the Department of Justice, and that has certainly changed since January 20th of this year. Well, that may be legal, that may be appropriate, that may be possible. It's certainly different than what we'd had experienced before. But whatever happened with this president in his private life and whatever happened with prior prosecution of him should have nothing to do with what happens with anyone else, whether it's James Comey or anyone else. And I just wish the president would take advice and not make those kinds of comments, not make those statements.
Well, we've also heard the president saying that he's warning more of his opponents could face criminal charges. So what can you tell us on that?
Well, he made a list last week with one of his Truth Social posts, and it was directed at Attorney General Pam Bondi. He said, "Pam, what's going on? Why are these people not being prosecuted?" He mentioned Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York. He mentioned Comey. He mentioned Senator Schiff, whom he used the pejorative language with him as well. It's just inappropriate. And certainly there's something in the criminal defense field called selective prosecution. And a defendant can have charges dismissed if he or she can prove that the prosecuting entity, usually a local district attorney or an attorney general, shows some animus or some bias toward the person. In this case, it seems the president, in an unprecedented way, is taking the helm as to who's leading this prosecution and who's directing it. And I think the first thing you'll see from James Comey is a motion to dismiss based on selective prosecution. And if there are other indictments, I think you'll see the same thing.
All right, we'll be watching very closely indeed. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.